of the East England Energy Group, EGA. And this is a presentation today. It's an introduction to Fit for Offshore Renewables, which is a supply chain development programme from ORE Catapult and the new Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership. It's a really full of content and a rich session with lots of experts and case studies to get through. During the course of the presentations, if I could ask you to turn off your microphones and your cameras just to preserve the bandwidth, please. And on that, could I have the next slide, please? So I still have to take you through some housekeeping issues. As I say, if you can make sure that your video and your mic are turned off at all times, please, unless you're a speaker. And that just helps us preserve the bandwidth and ensures that hopefully everyone has a good session. Please use the meeting chat area, which you can see is in the middle there, and that's a bubble, speech bubble that's there. Click on that with any questions you may have during the course of the presentations. We will not be taking questions live during the presentations, but rather having a Q&A session at the end, time permitting. And if for any reason we can't actually get through the various Q&A sessions or answer all the questions, we will then come back to you posting answers to any questions that you may put there. So as I say, please turn off your camera, turn off your microphone, enjoy the session and post any areas within the chat function there, and we'll try and make sure that we get to those questions during the Q&A at the end. So as I say, this is an introduction to Fit for Offshore Renewables, a supply chain development programme from ORE Catapult and the new Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership. At that point, I think I'm passing over to Andy Holyland of ORE Catapult. Andy, I think it's over to you now.
Hi, thank you, Simon. Next slide, please, Marie. Yep. Good morning, everybody. My name's Andy Holyland, the Regional Innovation Manager for the East of England with ORE Catapult. Welcome today to the Fit for Offshore Renewables webinar. As a region, there is an abundance of experience and a long history of offshore operations, as well as one of the largest concentrations of offshore wind activity off the Norfolk and Suffolk coast. With the climate emergency and a growing demand for a greener future, a focus on offshore renewable energy is essential. Next slide, please. Fit for Offshore Renewables is a business improvement programme that Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult, in collaboration with the High Value Manufacturing Catapults Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, established to support the development of competent, capable and competitive UK offshore renewable energy supply chain, maximising the economic opportunity both domestically and globally. Following the success of the Scottish pilot programme, we are delighted to be delivering the first regional programme across Norfolk and Suffolk this year. As Simon mentioned, the jointly funded Fit for programme between ORE Catapult and New Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership on this occasion will offer 10 places to the local supply chain to facilitate knowledge and capability building across specific business excellence and sector-specific modules to support business growth or entry into the offshore renewable energy industry. The Fit for New Anglia programme comes at an opportune time, a post-COVID supply chain restart programme in support of a green recovery, an opportunity for the supply chain to diversify and transition where required. Also an opportunity to better understand and meet regional challenges and gaps, and if necessary, adjust their offering to suit the industry. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague John Best, who's going to give a further intro into the New Anglia programme. Next slide, please, mate.
Good morning. I hope you can all hear me. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to be able to participate in this webinar. And if I can ask for the next slide, please. The region will be very familiar to all of you, I hope. It's the centre of the world, as I'd like to think of it, in the east of England. But I'm delighted to be able to bring my learning from helping to deliver the Scottish pilot project off. I was up nearly 2 years ago and helped to recruit the companies that came into the Fit for Offshore Renewables initiative. In those days, it was very new. And over the past 2 years, I'm really delighted to see how it's changed, evolved, and is in a place to help you shape your businesses to better offer what you have to the offshore wind industry. It's a timely thing as well with COVID. And as you can see in the little logo there, the postage stamp, the Economic Recovery Restart Plan by Norfolk and Suffolk Unlimited is really full on to be able to give you the opportunities to use an initiative like this. Indeed, in terms of the clean energy sector actions, it's the first in the list. Deliver Fit for Offshore Renewables Supply Chain Readiness Programme. So let's ask ourselves why you should be involved in this. Next slide, please. What is the Fit for Offshore Renewable Programme? Well, it's a business excellence programme, and that should be seen as complementary but alongside an accreditation process, for example, the ISO standards. What's the difference? Well, and why are we doing this? Well, an audit, as you can see in the little simple checklist there, just at high level, it tends to check compliance against the standard. It tends to be negative because you either pass or fail, and it's usually done by an external or an outside specialist. The joy of the self-assessment process is it works within your own system. And by helping to develop your business in a better way, this will position yourself better for offshore wind, but also for many other areas. So the business excellence model, as Ralph will tell you a little later on, splits into two halves. Approximately half is the generic improvement of business and working out what's in it for me and how can I present my company in a better way. And the other half is very specifically focused to the needs of the offshore wind developer, the tier ones, and those within the supply chain. So it gives you a very powerful self-assessment tool to focus the skills that you have. Next slide, please. And so a simple checklist before we get into the detail of what's in it for me. I won't read these through, the slide pack will be shared later, but all of these things will help you to run a better business, to give a better offer, and to present yourself as a more acceptable business to be considered to be within the supply chain. I'm going to introduce you now to Ralph, who's going to take over and give you some more of the detail. Ralph, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Ralph Torr. I'm the Fit for Offshore Renewable Energy Programme Manager here at the RE Catapult. So my input in today's webinar is actually going to be split into two different sections. The intention of my sessions is really to provide you with some detail about the component parts of the programme and how it works. If you could move on to the next slide, please. So yeah, I'll give you a brief intro to how the scope and content of the programme was developed and then talk you through the process. We're also currently just coming to the end of the pilot programme that we've run up here in Scotland, and I can provide you guys with a bit of insight into the findings and the impact that that's had on the organisations involved. Next slide, please. So the objective of the programme, as Andy touched on at the beginning, is really to help develop the competitiveness, the capacity and the competence of the UK supply chain, specifically the offshore renewable energy supply chain. And as John touched on, half of this programme has been developed very specifically for the offshore renewable energy sector. For those of you who don't know, the offshore renewable energy sector signed a deal last year with the UK government, and part of that was to drive up the level of UK content in UK projects. And this programme, along with a range of other activities in the industry, is intended to be a key part of allowing that to happen. In terms of who's involved in this, we're intending that organisations that already have some activity in the sector would benefit from this, but we're also very much looking to bring organisations from out with that supply chain into the offshore renewable energy supply chain, and the scope's been developed to support both sorts of organisations. Next slide, please. So the concept itself is building on a programme that was developed in the nuclear industry around about 10 years ago now. The concept behind the nuclear programme was really quite similar. There was a growing nuclear industry here in the UK, but there was a realisation that UK companies were perhaps not managing to make inroads into the sector, and there were some quite specific barriers that the supply chain faced to entering the nuclear industry, and that led to the development of the Fit for Nuclear programme. This Fit for Offshore Renewable Programme shares some similarities with that, and the concept's certainly the same. But as I say, a large part of the programme has been developed very specifically for offshore renewables. John's already described this isn't an audit, it's what we term a reality-based assessment of capability against a framework that we've developed very specifically. There's two parts to this. There's a core business excellence part, which we would say are really the kind of management systems that any kind of technical engineering product or service provider should have. There's a second part to this, which is very much a sector specific framework, and we've worked with the industry to develop this second part of the programme quite specifically. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of understanding how the scope and the content's been developed, the UK here is a growing offshore renewable energy sector, a rapidly growing offshore renewable energy sector, and we have very large ambitions for the sector over the coming decades. As part of the work to develop the supply chain, a number of different studies have been done over the last couple of years looking at how we can support the supply chain, and in particular, what are the barriers that exist. So this area has already been looked at by a number of different organisations a number of different times over the years, and we have used that existing body of knowledge and understanding, as well as talking directly to the supply chain and also our industry advisory group, to develop the scope and content. So the barriers themselves that we've identified here come from this broader piece of work, or pieces of work that have been done in the sector over the last couple of years. So it really is based in a kind of broader bit of work that the industry has done to understand what the barriers here, and we've tied the content very much to that. Next slide, please. So in terms of the meat to the programme, this is a bit of an insight into the two different areas. So as I say, on the left-hand side of your screen, you should be able to see the 6 different areas that we look at in the core business excellence part of the programme, and the 6 different areas we look at in the sector-specific competence part of the programme. So on the left-hand side, you have strategy and leadership, people, health and safety, environment, quality, design, project delivery, process and operations. As John highlighted earlier on, this is not intended to replace any activities that you would have ongoing in terms of continuous improvement or ISO accreditations, but I would highlight that even the core business excellence scope of the programme is typically much broader than you would look at in, for example, the ISO accreditation process 9001 and health and safety and environmental management as well. So we tend, for example, to find organisations performing relatively well in the area of health and safety and quality, because especially for those that have the ISO accreditations, there's a lot of focus there. But some of these other areas, strategy and leadership, people management, you wouldn't necessarily be required to subject yourself to any sort of independent assessment of these through the typical course of running your business, but they're really key to developing a successful business. So it's just worth highlighting that even the scope of the core business excellence part of the programme is quite broad, and we really will be digging into most parts of your organisation's kind of core operational and strategic activities. So they're the areas on the left-hand side. Within these, I should highlight that there's a range of kind of subtopics that we look at. There's 10 subtopics in each of these 6 areas in core business excellence, so quite a broad scope of work. On the right-hand side, the sector-specific competence. So these are areas that we have highlighted or identified as being specifically relevant to offshore renewable energy, and these relate to the findings in the work that we talked about previously. So some of the key barriers that we've identified in the course of developing this was organisations' knowledge of the sector more generally in terms of general development, how the supply chain is made up, relevant parts of technology. So that's an area that we look at in the course of the programme. Sector-specific health and safety. So even with the kind of generic health and safety management systems, there are some particular, I guess, risks and training requirements in offshore renewables. So we look at that in the second half of the programme here. Cost reduction and competitiveness. As the supply chain grows, there's a lot of new organisations coming in. It's very important that organisations understand how they are adding value and can add value to developers, and that they have really worked to make sure that that is well aligned with the needs of the developer. Capacity and capability, just looking to align yourselves with the requirements of the sector in terms of capacity and capability. And in terms of technical and commercial risk management, again, as the sector grows very rapidly, these are areas of particular focus in the developers and the tier one organizations to make sure that your organization really understands how to manage both technical and commercial risk, especially as it enters this growing sector. So that's just a brief overview of the two core areas of the program itself. As I say, if you have any specific questions, then feel free to pop them in the question box on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. Excellent. So I'll hand over to Rob from Vattenfall, and I'll pick up again in 5 minutes or so and talk you through the process side of the program. Rob, over to you, and Sue.
Morning, everyone. Skip forward a couple of slides, please. That's great, thank you. Morning, everyone. My name's Rob Anderson. I'm a project director at Vattenfall. Today is really just to give a quick developer's perspective and outline Vattenfall's offshore wind project developments, specifically the Norfolk Vanguard and Boreas projects, for which I'm the project director. So offshore wind is, and particularly these projects, is a key project for Vattenfall and our objective to live fossil-free within 1 generation. Next slide, please. This slide is just presenting Vattenfall's portfolio of offshore wind projects across Europe. We've currently got several projects under construction, representing over 700 megawatts. And we have several projects in development, over 6 gigawatts in development, and the Norfolk Vanguard and Boreas projects represent a large portion of that. Next slide, please. Yeah. Norfolk Vanguard and Boreas projects are shown here just off the Norfolk coast. These represent over 3.6 gigawatts of generation, which is equivalent to about 10% of the UK's domestic energy needs. These are significant projects, and we've been developing those for several years. I'm pleased to advise that Norfolk Vanguard has recently received planning consent from the Secretary of State, and Norfolk Boreas is currently under examination, and we expect the decision early next year. These projects are being developed strategically and together to deliver low carbon energy to the UK. We've taken several decisions to sort of work the development together, including shared infrastructure across the onshore and the offshore cable route, and the use of high voltage direct current transmission technology to lower the environmental impact across the projects. These projects represent a long-term commitment to the region. Construction is going to take several years, and operating in the region for 25 to 30 years. Okay, next slide, please. Just providing a timeline of where we are in the project's development. Said we've been focused on the planning consent, and we're very pleased to have received Norfolk Vanguard's decision in the last month. This has really sort of given us the opportunity to sort of continue the development and preparation for next year's contract for difference auction process. We're extraordinarily busy on the design, on procurement, and survey works. We've launched contracts both onshore and offshore to undertake sort of environmental and geotechnical and geophysical survey campaigns. And we are launching our procurement activities to go to market focused on the tier one contractors. Can I go to the, I think the, sorry, the, once the next big milestone really is the CFD auction, which is planned next year. Should we be successful in that, the activities will be focused really on the onshore construction and offshore construction, with first power planned to occur in 2026. Next slide, please. I won't go into too much detail in this slide other than just to highlight all the activities that we're undertaking right now to progress these projects. We are quite busy on engagement with the supply chain, undertaking activities in terms of procurement and design and tendering activities in anticipation of the CFD process next year. I think the key message I've got here is that really preparation is important, that we work together, that we understand the timelines and the objectives of the project, and that we involve all the local supply chains as much as we can in terms of the development of these projects. Next slide, please. So Vattenfall's Norfolk Vanguard and Boreas projects are only part of the massive development in the offshore wind sector in the East Anglia region. So we really recognize the challenge, and our commitment extends to collaborating and building skills in the region. We see long-term opportunities such as operation and maintenance hubs being developed to serve all the projects in the region, and we're working very hard on sort of supply chain and framework agreements. We've already entered into frameworks with locally based companies to support Vattenfall's presence in the UK. The opportunity is massive, but so is the challenge. So I think skills planning and training really needs to be at the forefront of our minds to ensure that we have the capacity to deliver together for the region. Can I go to the next slide, please? So just to finish, the scale of our projects means we need to plan ahead. We need to ensure that we have the right number of skilled people for the work. Within Vattenfall, we do this ourselves, but we don't necessarily do this across the whole supply chain. So it does need to be a partnership, and we fully encourage programs such as this. Our commitment extends to developing opportunities and gateways into working with Vattenfall. We have internship programs, apprenticeships, uni years in university, and collaborate over schools and college programs. We need to share intelligence over what is needed and when, especially to collaborate over filling any training gaps. So I think I'd just like to leave on the message that let's maximize our local content and training through good planning and support to programs such as this. Thanks very much.
Excellent, thanks for that, Rob. Can you flick on to the next slide, please? So this is just a brief overview of the process that we take you through in the programme. So I guess it's worth highlighting that we've already been working for a number of months now, both with the Local Enterprise Partnership, but also with the regionally active owner-operators, to help make sure that this programme delivers maximum value for the region, both by understanding where the existing strengths in the region are, but also where the opportunities are. And we can tie them quite specifically to particular developments over the next 10 years or so. Rob highlighted just there, there's a broad range of activity off the east of New Anglia at the moment, and we've been working with those organisations to help make sure that this programme is shaped to deliver maximum value for them. So as part of that, we've developed the kind of scope of the kind of participation that we're looking for this organisation, and we have launched an expressions of interest, which Andy will talk about a bit about at the very end. So once the expressions of interest are open and up and running, we will go through them and we will shortlist a range of organisations who we think are particularly well aligned with the regional opportunity and regional strengths. They will then be asked to complete a self-assessment against the criteria that we have, and that self-assessment will be further used to inform the selection process. Once we've identified the participants of the programme, we work initially with those organisations basically to make sure that both ourselves in the programme and the industrial advisors in the programme and that organisation have a shared understanding of exactly where the participant organisation is at the beginning of the programme. It's really important that both ourselves in the Fit4 programme and yourselves as participating organisations have a shared understanding of the kind of maturity and level of impact that your existing management systems are happening. That's the baseline that we start from, and then over a 12-month period we will work with your organisation to help you both to develop your core business systems, but also to develop that particular sector specific capability So the idea is that that work takes around about 12 months. The key kind of tool in managing that is an action plan that we work with yourselves to develop, which takes us from the baseline that we identify at the beginning to a kind of pre-agreed standard in each of the different areas at the end. So we agreed that action plan with yourselves. The role of the programme, it should be said, is very much to support the development of that action plan and the delivery of that. But I'll be very clear in saying that the real legwork is done by your own organisation. We're there to guide and mentor and support, but the real legwork is done by your own organisation. And in that respect, it's really clear that when you're entering into this programme, you've got a good understanding of the amount of time and effort that it might take to get your organisation through that. As you develop through this programme, as I say, we'll support you in all the areas that you need to be supported with. As your management systems develop and we see evidence of that development and implementation, then we work with your organisation as you get closer to the defined Fit for standard to make sure that we have a clear audit trail for that, and then we move you through a granting process. That granting process is really just a governance piece to demonstrate to ourselves that you have made the improvements that we identified, and that that awarding of the Fit for status is something that is being done, appropriately. Once you are granted, there's a range of different activities that we will support your organisation with. There's clearly some, promotional activities around that. And there's a number of kind of specific events and activities that we will be running and supporting Fit for organisations with, but it will also create great visibility for your organisation within the region in particular, and we would hope lead to a kind of longer term collaboration, particularly with the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult, as we identify the organisations that have been through this and support them further from the Fit for Offshore Renewable Programme. So as I say, overall it's a 12-month journey that we're looking to take organisations on here. But really, we would say at the end of that 12 months, whilst you'll have done some really good work to get there, the Catapult sees this as a kind of longer term journey, both with our organisation, but also, your improvement journey within the sector and your success within the sector. If you could flick over onto the next slide, please. So in terms of, there's just a couple of snippets that I'll mention in terms of the Scottish pilot programme that ran. So there's particular areas that we felt the programme had particular benefit. So in the sector specific part of the programme and the business excellence, we felt there were a number of areas that the programme really added particular value across most of the participating organisations. In the business excellence part of the programme, we worked a lot on looking at the way that processes within organisations are managed, and I would say in most of the organisations we supported them to really grow and improve the way that they manage process within their organisation, and that's very directly tied to efficiency of product and service development as well. So that was an area that we had particular impact in, and also people management, so training, and also supporting kind of high potential employees within the organisation. Again, in some of the organisations that were involved, this was an area that there was ambition to work in, but that hadn't really developed into formal management systems, and we worked with those organisations to really embed excellent people management. And particularly when you talk about longer term success of organisations, managing your people well is a really key part of that kind of longer term success. So there were two areas that we looked at in the business excellence part of the programme that we felt had real impact. If you move on to the next slide, please. In terms of the main areas that we worked with, or the main areas that we felt really kind of stood out as areas that most of the participants benefited from, sector knowledge was clearly one. A number of the organisations in the programme had a very limited knowledge of the sector, and we worked with them to make sure that their knowledge of the broader sector, project activity, technology and supply chain makeup improved, and that's something the RE Catapult can help with significantly through the role that we have in the industry. Outside of that, this cost reduction and competitiveness area of assessment was another one that we felt that we worked with the various participating organisations with constructively, and it's worth highlighting there's a lot of organisations entering the offshore renewable energy supply chain at the moment, and it's really important that organisations entering the supply chain work work hard in advance of engaging with the tier ones and the developers to really understand what value they can add, and that is articulated in a clear and objective and focused way. Simply presenting your products and services without clearly articulating how they add value to the developer is something that that often challenges organizations entering the supply chain. And also, as I say, making claims about, offering great service and great products, but without substantiating them in, for developers and large tier one organizations being approached by a large number of organizations, it's really important to make sure that any claims or any marketing material that you put out there are really well tied to the needs of the sector, and so that really resonates with those who are ultimately making decisions about your involvement in project activity. The other thing to flag as well is cost benchmarking as well. So I'm sure you'll all be aware that Offshore Renewables has made remarkable progress in reducing costs over the last 5 or 10 years. One of the key elements of that is quite detailed kind of cost modeling work and cost benchmarking work that's been done. So if you're offering a product or service into the sector, one of the things that we do is work with your organization to make sure you really understand where you need to be aiming for in terms of a price point in the delivery of relevant products and services, to make sure that is consistent with the broader project budget that, for example, a CFD might have been awarded on. So they're probably the two main areas of impact that I would highlight with respect to the sector specific part of the programme. Next slide, please. Okie doke. Some broader findings here that I'll just touch a couple on here. First of all, the scope of the programme is quite broad, certainly much broader than any ISO audit. So do be prepared to talk to us and show us things that you probably won't have had looked at by external organisations before. I should say the Fit for standard is high. So certainly a number of the organisations that engaged in the pilot programme really had to do quite significant amounts of work to get to that standard. And part of the reason we do the self-assessment as part of the pre-selection process here is to make sure that it's a realistic the amount of work that organisation can undertake in the year to get through that. I've already mentioned the fact that key areas of strength that we determined in the pilot were health and safety and quality because of the auditing in those areas, but out with that there was a very mixed performance. Some organisations were star performers across the board, however others we felt were very focused on doing what they need to do from a quality and a health and safety perspective, but really weren't dedicating much resource in other areas, which is not particularly conducive to really kind of capable and competitive product and service development. So they're probably the main areas to highlight. I should say that we're not expecting all organisations to start this journey and go on a massive transformational journey. A couple of the organisations that started with us, were already very high performing organisations, and this process just allowed us to kind of give them a badge to promote that, and also for us to kind of speak to the broader industry about them. And you'll hear from a number of the organisations going through the programme just shortly. So yeah, I'll finish up there on the process and overview of the programme. By all means, if you've got questions, please post them in the meeting chat on the right hand side. If we don't get through all of them in the course of this webinar, then we'll try and make sure that we feed back to yourselves in some way, shape or form in the coming days and weeks. Okay, Maria, if you just want to flick on to the next slide. Yeah, I'll hand over to Laura now.
Thanks for that, Ralph. So I'm Laura Fairley and I'm the Market Development Manager of James Fisher Asset Information Services. So the Fit for Offshore Renewable Programme came at a good time for us as we changed from being previously known as Return to Scene to the new James Fisher Asset Information Services. So I suppose a wee overview of that side of stuff is what we do is we pull together all the kind of digital offerings from James Fisher Group, and we have them all under the one roof. If you can skip to the next slide, please. So R2S as the product line had been used in oil and gas for over 10 years. So it started in the forensic industry and moved over to oil and gas. And then what we were finding is that the pain points found within oil and gas were actually very similar to what we were hearing for offshore wind. So we thought that it would be quite a nice transfer over into this industry. This combined with the expertise from our James Fisher sister companies such as EDS and JFMS, we decided that the offshore wind was the next logical step. So when the opportunity arose to work with ORE Catapult and the Fit for Offshore Renewables scheme, it was just like perfect timing. What we found, and as Ralph said, is that they're very, very supportive. So they come in after your self-assessment, they speak you through all of the different areas, and they work with you to align yourselves to kind of the standards that they're expecting within industry. This has allowed us to be able to implement new processes. So we're bang on in the middle of our journey. So we're currently in the action plan stage when we're trying to, I suppose, make slight changes to the processes that we have, really focus on that value proposition and take it to the next stage. If you can skip to the next slide, please. So R2S and offshore wind. So as I said, it's transferable from oil and gas, and the value propositions we found are very similar. So here are our main four. So it's saving money, improving safety, saves time and enhances collaboration. So one of the main things that we found speaking with developers is that safety is obviously really, really high on the list, and the ability to access your site remotely helps you to not have to go on as many journeys out to turbines or access substations. The diagram here is a snippet from our R2S software. This is actually of the Leavenmouth demonstration turbine, where we did a full 360-degree virtual tour of the turbine, and then we added on all the data that was relevant, and we're looking at working with ORE to pull in live data as well, so that you can kind of get that contextualization of any information you want. I suppose the really easy way to say it is it's kind of a window to all your data. So in the process of this whole journey, we've started speaking to a lot of different developers just about their pain points, seeing where they are in the digital kind of journey. And what we're hearing is that some of them have up to 17, 18 different software systems for the one wind farm. And this kind of gives them the ability to access it all quickly, to have one place to go, and allows people to do it remotely as well. So if you have team members, especially in the current situation across the country, it allows them to all see the same information and pull together like the next planning stages. If you can skip to the next one, please. So our next steps are to continue with the action plan, and we're trying to work out the best ways to do this around the current restrictions. What Ralph said is totally true. It's a whole team effort. So we're having it spearheaded by our QHSE lead, and we're basically getting all the team involved for different aspects of it. And it's actually a really good way to engage people, and it allows them to put forward their ideas. Also for JFAIS, we're having workshops with individuals from industry. So far we've had 5 of these with different developers. As I mentioned, we're just speaking them through their digitalisation process. Obviously we have the R2S offering, but within James Fisher AIS, we also have OWMS and Mermaid, along with other softwares. So there's a kind of real ecosystem of digital softwares that we're offering. And then the next stage, which will be good after the restrictions have been lifted, is that we're actually going to be carrying out a survey on a turbine and an onshore substation with a developer. And what we're going to be doing with this is we have put success criteria in place, and over the course of 6 months, we'll be working out exactly the value that it is bringing back to the developer. And at the end of that, we're going to be publishing a case study. So that's a very, very brief kind of outline to what we've done so far. And my contact details are here. So if there's any questions, obviously you can put it in the chat here and we'll try to answer them at the end. But if we don't manage, feel free to drop me an email. And that's me. And what I would do is if you jump to the next slide, I'll introduce Ian Milne from Balmoral.
Thank you very much, Laura. That was great. Yeah, I want to skip to the next slide. So I'm Ian Milne. I work with Balmoral. So we've just, as of last year, had a dedicated renewables kind of team that we've created, and I'm leading our kind of market entry into that. We're a privately owned company, headquartered in Aberdeen. That image in the top right is our facility. So everything in yellow is all our kind of traditional oil and gas products, if you like. 250,000 square foot manufacturing facility there. We also have sales offices in Houston and also in Newcastle, along with some manufacturing facilities in Newcastle as well. About 300 people out of Aberdeen, maybe about 400 or 500 within the group globally. We've also got agents positioned in key areas, and we also have Europe's largest privately owned subsea test centre for hyperbaric testing and pressure testing. That's just been opened a couple of years ago after private investment again from our owner. So, you know, coming from Aberdeen, and it's not a surprise that we've kind of had a focus on oil and gas for the last 40 years. But with energy transition and with the fact, you know, that I think it's $42 or $43 a barrel today, you know, you have to look in other markets, and our clients are going to these other markets. So, I mean, we're traditionally, in that bottom picture there on the left, everything in yellow below the water is what we've been known for traditionally, in the distributed buoyancy modules, drill riser buoyancy, bend stiffeners, and flow line protection, etc. So what Fit for Offshore Renewables have been doing with us is actually helping us transition into the renewables market and kind of getting you up to that standard and get into the market conditions, because it is different. We go to the next slide. So what have they done for us? I mean, I think one of the major kind of USPs for me is the exposure to the main players within the renewable market. It is different operators, it is different developers, and also in terms of installation contractors as well. So they've helped us understand the market expectations, embracing continuous improvement. So that's something Balmoral's always been, you know, renowned for. And we're always looking at that, but you know, that extra endorsement from Fit for Offshore Renewables has helped us along that journey. And also, you know, the highlight points where you think, you know, everyone thinks everybody's doing a great job, and they say, well, you know, maybe think about doing it this way. Have you tried doing it differently? So that's been very, very good. As I mentioned, you know, the energy transition from oil and gas to renewables, you see Total, you see Shell, BP, they've all done huge, Equinor, huge commitments, and already in you know, with sanctioned projects that have already had CFD with these guys. So you have to follow them and support with what it is we can actually offer. Driving communication throughout all levels of the organisation was quite a good one for us. You know, making sure everyone's on board and understands the journey and what we're actually doing and why we're doing it. Also ensuring that the processes and procedures are, you know, you're benchmarking against what is an industry norm. You know, you get audits from your clients, you've got your ISO accreditations, that's all fine. But you have to think about, well, what's the expectation over and above that? So Fit for Offshore Renewables has been very helpful in doing that. Risk and exposure element. So Balmoral has a significant role. You know, it's not just offshore wind. You know, there's wave and tidal. You know, there's a lot of opportunity there as well. So what we've done now is taking the technology. You know, if you look at floating wind, so Balmoral's been very busy and very big at FPSO markets. You know, and that technology exists in floating wind. So in terms of kind of cost innovation, you know, a deep water project for Balmoral is 7,000 meters, but a deep water floating project for renewables is maybe 200 or 300 meters. So you have to kind of look at how you can enhance your offering into that. I'll go on the next slide. So how we're progressing. So this is us now, fixed wind offshore solutions. We're having the cable protection systems. You've got a shot there of our actual our testing tower where we do the testing setups for replicating monopile poolings, floating wind, as I mentioned, distributed buoyancy modules, stiffeners, protections and tether systems. So all that existing technology that we'll have, we're bringing into the market, but we just need a little bit of direction, a little tweak in how we do it. Wave and tidal, similar kind of offering. So with the endorsement of the Fit for Offshore Renewable Programme, we can now position ourselves within the renewable market in the same light that our traditional business has been built for the last 40 years. Specialist subsea products and how we can do it for the environments that the renewable projects are going to be in. So the Fit for Offshore Renewable journey has been pretty significant in helping us do that. Like Laura, we're almost, we haven't had the granted stage yet, but we're knocking on the door. I think it's, you know, the next kind of couple of weeks or so we should be finished up. And that's it. I mean, if there's any other questions, offline, or if you go to modeloffshore.com, you can read about how great we are and keep up to speed and all the things. But I think this has been a good journey, and I would certainly encourage companies to do it. And on that note, I'll pass on to Janet Ricks from TECOSIM, and she'll tell us all about them. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Hello, good morning. My name's Janet Ricks from TECOSIM Simulation Limited, and I'm here really to talk about what we do and our journey so far into the renewable energy sector. I've been working within renewable energy since about 2005, so I've always had a real passion for it. And back in October 2018, I joined TECOSIM, who are a company working mainly in the automotive and aerospace sectors. I had a chat with Stuart Hawker, the MD, about how the technologies that TECOSIM have could then be transferred into other industries. And then it became my mission to advance what we did into the renewable sector. We became eager members back in October 2018, and I was invited to sit on the SIG, the Special Interest Group for Offshore Wind, which has been wonderful because we've met so many different companies and learned an awful lot from people, but that were experienced. And then in December 2018, I met up with John Bess, an old friend, if you like, who invited me to meet him at the Asda in Lowestoft. We had a cup of tea. And he then said to me, why don't you come to an event that's going to be held the next day in Norwich? And he introduced me to Martin Whitmarsh, who was the former CEO of McLaren. And he was undertaking a remit to examine the expertise and technologies from different sectors, in particular automotive, which he thought would be beneficial for the wind sector. So for me, it was absolutely perfect timing. Then what we did was in May 2019, we attended the SNS 2019 event, and we had an exhibition stand there. This was chaired and managed by EGA, and our engineering director gave a presentation demonstrating our capabilities, and we made some really good contacts there, learning more and more what other people are offering. And then in June 2019, we went to the Global Offshore Wind event at the Excel Centre in London. And there we met Andy McDonald, the Executive Director of the Offshore Wind Group Partnership, and Andy Martin from Catapult. Then based on that, we were introduced, they were so helpful, we were introduced to a lady called Kirsten Dyer, and then she was the head of materials research for the Blythe Catapult testing centre. So me and the chief engineer, we went up there to Blythe. She took us around and we saw the rain testing rig, which was absolutely fascinating. And they explained about how the different technologies and the materials required for the blades needed a lot of study. So on the basis of that, we then found there were two opportunities we could look to apply for feasibility studies, mainly to look at the technology, the erosion and sensors for the blades. Well, we weren't successful, but what we did was we gained an awful lot of deeper knowledge of the industry. And as a result of that, TECOSIM have now become much better known, which is something when you're new into the industry. Another positive steps that we've connected with the Into Power organisation, part of the LEP, and we've been invited to marketing events. One was in Lowestoft and the other was in Copenhagen. So we've made some really good contacts. As a result, we picked up some little projects that we could do, which were going to be helpful for future case studies. Next slide, please. So what do we do and what do we think we can bring to the industry? Well, we're an engineering services company and we deliver solutions, mainly automotive, aerospace and the marine sectors. And I think what we do is we just take the guesswork out of real physical testing. We've got computer-aided engineering, which is looking at numerical calculations. It reduced cost dramatically. So, for example, a crash test prototype vehicle, which in the past had to be bashed into walls, now it can all be done by virtual modelling. We did an amazing project on a horse saddle, looking at the weight on a horse's back and how we could develop a new saddle that wouldn't cause injury during a race. But the best thing, I suppose, is the Olympic torch, which we did back in 2012. We designed the torch, 12,000 were made and only one had to be actually physically tested. So what we think we can offer, well, basically we can offer work, we think, on turbine structures and blade erosion, using CAD to predict wear and tear. We've been looking at seabed erosion, monitoring the ebb and flow of water and predict the lifespan of cables under the seabed, and also sensor technology, which we could do remotely to capture real-time data to analyse the blade condition and prevent maybe unnecessary maintenance and potential catastrophic failures. Next slide, please. So why we want to be part of this opportunity? Well, 18 months ago, we'd only just started the journey, and to be invited to this webinar is a direct result of how far we think we've come. We've built up some excellent relationships and we've shared information. We understand the language of the industry now, which we didn't before. And though we weren't successful, we did apply for these opportunities, and it's really whetted our appetite to continue. Our network's much richer now because of the journey we started, and really with the cost savings we can make, which can be up to 90% in time and cost, the developers, I think, would be really keen to know a little bit more about how CAE technology can help. We're into development of low carbon technologies. We work on electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. So the energy sector is really a big part of our future strategy. And as we're based in Hethel in Norfolk, we're ideally situated in the heart, really, of the supply chain in the East Anglia region. So we're really excited about the potential of CAE and using it in the energy sector. And we're really looking forward to how we can demonstrate the benefits that advanced engineering can bring. So thank you very much. And I'll hand you back over now to Ralph Torr. Oh, to Andy, beg your pardon, Andy.
Hi, Janet. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for everyone else that's given their overview to this date. Next slide, please. Just to give everybody a sort of an overview now of the eligibility criteria and also in relation to the expressions of interest. If anyone has already been to our website, they would have seen some of this detail already. Essentially, the Fit for programme is one of a number of ORE Catapult initiatives that support supply chain growth. This webinar and the information within really is a call to arms to sort of encourage you to express an interest. For the Fit for programme, participating companies can range from those with no offshore renewable experience to those established tier 1 suppliers wanting to benchmark their position and drive business excellence. Generally, the Fit for programme is designed for established businesses with 10 or more employees or with a turnover of 1 million or at least working towards that. And again, just as important, with applicable products and services. And if you are operating outside of offshore renewable energy with a sort of a proactive commitment already started to transition. Micro enterprises and or newly established organisations who have identified the offshore renewable sector as a strategic opportunity, if they don't meet the eligibility criteria for this programme, should still get in touch, as there are a number, as Janet's mentioned, a number of other ORE Catapult initiatives that may be more suitable and offer significant benefits to your ambitions. As Ralph mentioned before, there is a self-assessment or a self-assessment process to go through to aid and confirm selection onto the programme. So it's really down to making sure that your organisation has that commitment and determination to complete the programme, and your management systems, etc., have the ability to facilitate that business improvement. So I think it's definitely worth, if you've identified the products and services that are relevant to the industry, and especially if they meet some of those regional supply chain gaps or challenges, to look to express an interest and engage with us to identify further. As I mentioned before, the expressions of interest is open. It's been open on the website. I've put a couple of other links there around some information for the Fit for New Anglia video via our ORE Catapult YouTube channel, and also the Launch Academy, which is a technology accelerator program, which again might be more applicable to where you are within your current ambitions. And also then there's the a link to the labour mouth demonstrator video, which kind of shows how or shows some of the ways that the products and services and new technology can be demonstrated and proven concepts through these different initiatives. Next slide, please. Quick overview of the key dates. So where we are today with the webinar, and just to reconfirm, the expression of interest call is open, and the expression of interest will close on the 31st of August 2020. We will make contact with all of those that have expressed an interest. Under embargo, we'll engage with those that have been pre-selected and those that are unfortunately unsuccessful, but hopefully we can identify other initiatives that will benefit those, and we'll discuss those next steps. It is the intention to announce publicly those successful organisations onto the programme at EGA's SNS 2020 virtual event this year. And obviously we'll have those conversations with all those companies prior to that. And we intend to start the programme formally on the 1st of October. With the intention going forward from that start date, we'll look to run quarterly cohort sessions, and we'll treat it as a cohort, so there's that collaboration, that shared learning, but also we'll hopefully have that industry engagement to maximise the programme delivery. Next slide, please. Okay, excellent. So I thank you everybody for their attendance today. I hope it's been informative. I think I'll hand over now to Simon just to control the sort of Q&A process. And please feel free to put some more questions on the chat function, and we'll answer as many of those in the time we've got left. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Andy. If I could ask those people that spoke to turn their cameras and mics on, and we'll start the Q&A. I think we're only realistically going to get a couple of questions in. And just to say that we've gone through a hell of a pace today. Well done, everyone, for getting through it. We've had about 50 or so people online at any one time. If you need to refer back to this, we will be posting a video of the entire events afterwards as well on both the Catapult and the EGA websites as well, and we'll contact you with a link to that. A few questions to kick off with. First of all, I guess it's probably for Andy and perhaps for Ralph, but the geographical footprint for this, I think is a question, that some people are saying, is it just for Norfolk and Suffolk? So can you tell me, what's the geographical footprint for the actual programme?
Andy, do you want to fill that one, or it's
yeah.
Andy, I'll let you talk through that.
Yeah, I'll start initially, Ralph, and let you sort of finish off if you want. It's the footprint for this programme is across the Norfolk and Suffolk area, and that's purely down to this being the first regional programme that, as I mentioned at the start, is jointly funded between the New Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership and ORE Catapult. So that essentially takes care of the programme delivery, the two areas of the programme that Ralph mentioned around business excellence and sector-specific knowledge. So this programme at this stage is across the Norfolk and Suffolk areas, but as I say, essentially it's a national programme that hopefully will reach further as we go forward. Ralph, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've touched on the New Anglia programme specifically. So that's co-funded by the LEP. So we're really looking for organisations within their jurisdiction. But yeah, this is the one of a number of regional programmes that we're rolling out over the coming, I guess, 6 months or so. And yeah, so the idea is that we can develop a national programme, but with particular kind of regional, priorities and collaborating regionally as well.
Could I just add one point in there? It's certainly Norfolk and Suffolk for the participants, but don't forget this is a global industry, and that's really the powerful part. We've got some very strong developers in our region being able to develop your expertise through the Fit for Offshore Renewable Programme and then potentially export products globally. We can even go to Scotland and take a little bit back up there. So I think that's the fascinating thing for me with the programme. The offshore wind sector deal has a 5-fold increase in exports. This would be a wonderful nursery slope to be able to hone the skills required to be able to export globally through the offshore wind sector deal.
Thanks for that, John. And another question, I think, for Catapult, which is really asking about training. Does the programme advise, source and support, and by the term support, I guess, pay for, any training activities required to meet the needs of the programme?
No, so the role of the industrial advisors in the programme is probably best described as a kind of guidance and mentorship role, and the funding that we've allocated to the programme that's being co-supported by the LEP is focused on that guidance and mentorship and delivery of the programme. If there are other development needs within the organisation, whether it's training or investment of any way, shape or form, that's certainly something that we can work with the organisation to help kind of develop and scope, but it's not something that the programme itself can fund or deliver directly.
Andy, do you want to add to that at all, or?
No, I think the only thing I probably would add is, the whole intention of the programme is to identify the requirements of the offshore renewable energy industry. So if there are gaps or opportunities that come out of this programme that the companies sort of need to look to adjust or adapt to meet, then we can support them with that. But yeah, essentially it's down to the company and the organisation if they want to move into that space to meet those challenges.
I also note that Rachel Bunn from East Coast College was very quick in there to say that East Coast College may be able to assist with other funds towards training. So if you do have a specific training requirement within this, there may be other pots available elsewhere. So do ask EGA or ask the LEP, or indeed ask Andy, because Andy will have other contacts elsewhere as well. Interesting one here. Operators are now pushing for the risk to be taken by a single contractor, which would mean most of the available supply chain being a subcontractor to that main contractor. How does the programme work together with main and subcontractors? So I think we'll hear from Catapult and then maybe from Vattenfall on that as well, if you'd be so kind.
Yeah, so one of the key parts of the sector knowledge part of the programme is helping organisations understand how the supply chain is structured in the industry, both how that's been done previously and how we see that developing. We've clearly worked very closely with the developers and the tier ones to define the scope of the programme, and I'm sure Rob will touch on this, but even if you're not contracting directly to those organisations, the commitments that they have made through supply chain plans or CFDs or anything like that are passed down through the supply chain. So I would say that what you will get from participation in this programme is a good understanding of how the supply chain is structured and where your organisation fits into that, and you'll have a good understanding of what the broader industry expectations are. And I would say, to a greater or a lesser extent, it doesn't really matter where you're actually integrating into the supply chain. They are broad industry expectations and requirements, and wherever you feed in, you're going to need to understand what they are.
Rob, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, not much to add. That's exactly the point. I think, whilst we do engage with the tier one contractors for our projects, is certainly up to them, and we encourage them to engage sort of in their subcontracting approach, making sure that the local content requirements are there and that they bring those local suppliers along with them. And Vattenfall as a company, I think we have the strategies to engage as early as possible across the industry, both at the tier ones and the local companies, and to encourage that the tier ones are participating and building those relationships as early as possible.
Thank you, Rob.
Could I Ian Milne here, Balmoral, maybe just add something in there as well? It seems an open discussion. I've certainly found, like in our experience, you do need to do a bit of homework in terms of the liabilities and the kind of things you're getting asked to get signed up to, because it is, I know that, your Yarmouth area is not down with you as well. A lot of it's been oil and gas, kind of similar to what Aberdeen has been. But you need to look at warranty periods, your contractual liabilities, and your exposure, because it is different. It is different to what you'd be more used to in abbreviated commas. I would just maybe add that.
Briefly, have you found the margins tighter within offshore renewables as opposed to oil and gas?
Yeah, well, oil and gas has been in recession for the last 4 years. So, on that point, the price of oil was $20 a barrel. So, in terms of Balmoral, what we do, we're always looking at innovation. That kind of goes side and side with what Ralph's team has been doing with the Fit for Offshore Renewable Programme. It's the value that opposed to that, the price of the widget. So if you can enhance that value with it, but it is a cost-driven market. But you have to remember these are multi-billion pounds investments, and Mr. Anderson from Vattenfall will back us up in that as well. It's a lot of investment for them, but the risk is certainly, I've noticed, it's one of the key flags for me has been, you sign up to a lot more exposure. So you have to kind of balance that risk reward against it as well. But there's plenty of opportunity.
Now, people's time is really precious. We've gone 3 minutes over, so those of you that only had a short window in your diary, I will be wrapping up in just a second. I've got one last question from the questions that have been coming through, if I may, which is, I think someone's basically asking, are you allowed to apply both for Fit for Nuclear and Fit for Offshore Renewables at the same time? Catapult, would you like to answer that?
Yes, there's no nothing to preclude you from getting involved in both of those organisations or both of those programs. Sorry. So the selection process is distinct from one to the other. So being accepted into one doesn't mean that you're being accepted into the other. But yeah, we'd be delighted to see a number of organisations involved in both programs, and certainly would encourage any Fit for Nuclear existing organisations who are interested in Fit for Offshore Renewables. We'd very much encourage them to consider participation in the Fit for Offshore Renewables programme.
So there are some other questions in the chat area, and we'll try and address those offline, but we are now sort of 4 minutes over, so I obviously want to try and gradually wrap up proceedings now. So we'll attempt to answer those questions. As I say, you'll all also receive a link to a video for this whole session, so you'll be able to go back and pick up on any of the URLs or links that are embedded within any of the presentations as well. So I'd just like to thank all our speakers and to ORE Catapult for today and working with us on this. A couple of dates for your diary, if I may. We have a Kuwait market event on the 22nd of July. So those of you looking for opportunities in Kuwait, that will be one of our next upcoming webinar. We also have Scottish Power Renewables and their East Anglian hub and Offshore Wind Growth Partnership with Scottish Power Renewables on the 29th of July at 10:30 in the morning. And of course, our main flagship event is SNS 2020, now virtual, and that's all about smart generation and the transition to 2050, and that's taking place on the 16th and 17th of September. Do please go along to our website and have a look at the events section there. Thanks again to all our speakers, Andy Holyland, John Best, Ralph Torr, Rob Anson and Sue Falsh, Ralph Torr, Laura Ferry, Ian Milne, Janet Ricks, Andy Holyland, and thank you all very much indeed for attending today. Thank you and goodbye. If I could just ask our speakers to hang on and we'll have a quick wrap up